Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Welcome again, sir, for the technical session.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. Acha.
We are about to start with the first technical session of our maiden venture faculty development program on changing paradigms in of human rights in a globalized world. The first technical session would be chaired and the keynote speaker would be Dr. Afzal sir. The topic is the protection of human rights and interplay between international humanitarian law and the international human rights law. Obviously, the expert is itself here. So, not taking much of the time, I would like Vani sir to kindly commence the session.
Okay. So it's very great to be with you again, Professor Siddiqui and all others, Big and then Head. Uh, the topic is protection of human rights. And then I have to look at it from this uh, interplay between international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Let me begin by saying that whenever we think of protection of human rights, then the first question which always comes is who has to protect? There, I would like to clarify that basically human rights are available against the state. All other rights which are among us the people, for that remedies are available in the ordinary law, and then in law courts they litigate. But when it's the question of human rights, they are available against the state. And the emergence of human rights itself explains that how they are to be respected and who has to respect them. Uh, as we find that uh, the concept of state, when it came, and state is an organism, it's an entity, people live in it, they bring it into existence for what? For living together, and then for living for a better life, and all that in harmony, in peace, in attaining the objectives of life. Now, the most important thing to be noted is that state emerged as the most powerful organism. And as being the most powerful organism, it has the capacity to do harm also, because though state is itself something which is not having its own mind, own hands, but actually, it's a human being who has to be working for the state, who has to operate the institutions in the state, who has to work out things for the people. So it's not the angels who come and operate the state, it's the human beings. And therefore, what happens is that when an individual is enjoying an office of authority in the state, there are possibilities of his excessive use of the power, abuse of power, sometimes non-use of power, and that results into the harm and misery of the human beings. So I would say, had the state been something run by the angel, then definitely we would say that angels have not their own desires. They are not having their own wishes. They do only whatever is being told to them by the creator or by that lawmaker, whatever, whoever is making the laws for them, whoever is giving the program to them. And when a state comes into existence, that also comes into existence with a program. That also comes into existence with a vision and agenda. That also comes into existence with the purpose of working for the people who are living in it. And that's how we find in a state, uh, along with territory, sovereignty, and government, people are very important component. So the people of the state, they are very important. It's for the people that a state is coming into existence. And accordingly, we have to see that when human beings have to run the state, and they have to run it for the people, and they have to ensure peace, harmony, and dignity to the people. They have to make everybody feel at home in the state for which it has come into existence. And for that, if in the Hobbesian term we say a social contract has brought it into existence, then definitely we see that the person in authority should behave in accordance with the vision and agenda and for the betterment of all the people living in that state. However, human experience has something different to say. Sometimes a state, even not at war with any other state, is not treating its own people, some of them, or all of them, or many of them, or few of them, in accordance with the basic agenda of that state. And that's how we have in modern world mostly the nations or the countries are having their constitutions which determine their rights, which determine the system, which give them a governance system, which give them an administrative system, which give them a system to have the institutions and the operational mechanism that's contained in those, we call them the basic documents as the constitutions. So even if it is not written somewhere, but it is written in tradition, in convention, in custom, in very strong belief, thought, public opinion, it's there. In their experience, it's there. So I would say that the state comes into existence for the betterment of all the people, everyone. And then at the same time, we have to accept the reality that it is not run by anybody like an angel without his own wishes and desires. It's run by human beings. Now, when human beings do it, mostly they have their own vision, understanding, and their own desires, good or bad, excessive or abusive, whatever, though mostly harmonic and peaceful also. So there is a need that there should be some standards for running the state. There should be some standards for conducting governance. There should be some standards for having administration. There should be some standards of developing relationship between the state and its subjects so that the power which is vested too much in the state, most powerful organism in modern world, the power is not misused. The power is not overused. The power is not underused. Or there is not non-use of power when it is required to be used. So, dear friends, having that experience, we have seen as in the world, this thought got so much precipitated that ultimately it resulted into different different kinds of developments in terms of acceptance of the norms, in terms of adoption of conventions and customs, in terms of being considerate to others through treaties, agreements, and others. We found that that in the previous centuries, we find a different kind of understanding developed, where the people of the world, they started thinking in terms of giving the best to the human being and then protecting the human being from the rigors of the state, from from anything abuse or misuse or overuse of power by the state, or discriminatory approach of the state. That's and I gave the latest examples of uh, what we had the experience during American War of Independence. What were the factors behind it, and how the state was misusing its power, how their colonial master was, taking away their rights, not allowing them to flourish the way they wanted, or they were being controlled and curbed so that they do not come up well with their own energy, with their own liberty, with their own standards, and with their own efficiencies. That's how they came with that War of Independence and ultimately got it. And then they had their own agenda through their own constitution, and then they gave the experience of American Bill of Rights. And even within, I would say, I can say that even within there is some uh, issues when a state is not at war with others, still within the state, we find the misuse of the power of the state. It's sometimes made abusive, discriminatory, and all that. That's what I'm saying. And we have that French Declaration of Rights of the Man. That's for this purpose, so that it restricts the state power. It restricts the state from eroding the dignity and personality of the human being, and without eroding his enjoyment of the rights reasonably and rationally. And England became in itself a very great experience of it, and then the whole of the world. So this time you find that you have seen the abuse of power by the state in the latest human history in the last 200 years. If you just go into the history of 100 years or 200 years, you'll find, yes, states have abused the powers, states have overused the power, states have discriminated, and that's how it needs some kind of standardization of the governance principles, governance norms, some kind of control is required there. And that's how the institutions have developed. And separation of powers, we find. We find the separation of powers. This also has come in the same way, so that the same person has not to make the law, same person will not execute the law, and same person will not judge wherever there is overuse of legislative power or excessive use of executive power. And that's behind that is the spirit, the same spirit, that the power of state, when concentrated at one place, it results into its abuse and excessive use and like that. So, dear friends, as I said, in the previous century, in 20th century, we found a lot of abuse of the power within the nations, and then we found it, uh, you know, uh, being used in such a way that certain people in those states were treated in a way as if they were not its own people. That's very important to be noted. When there is this protection of human rights getting more important an issue, it becomes more important when somebody is not made to feel that he is also included in the people of his nation, in his country. And then he is discriminated, maybe on any ground, racial, color, creed, whatever. So that has happened. You all know it. Does not need much explanation. And at the same time, there is another dimension also, that not within the state, when a state is at war with another state. And in such a situation, also, the people are using their might to show down another in any way, whatever. So if country X is at war with country Y, they don't show any respect to their ecology. They can destroy it. They don't show any respect to their this environment, as I said, to their crops, to the people there, to women, to children, to those who are not with arms, to those who are without arms, old people, handicapped people. They don't show any respect. And then they only have one thing in mind, that's they want to show the might. And that's how they are more and more conscious about winning the war. And that's a great too much of human experience is there on that. Now I said two situations, that a state is the powerful organism. Second, that within a state, the state or the people in position of power, they do not treat certain people in accordance with the basic principle of the state, that all the people should be respected and all the people are the partners in power, and all the people are partners in resources of the state. They are partners in the governance of the state, and they all are partners in respect and dignity. When that's And third is that when a state is at war with another, there also the people in authority, they want to show more their might rather than they show respect to the people, to ecology, to crops, or anything whatever is with another state. They don't show respect for that. They want to destroy it. Their only purpose is to weaken the enemy. Their only purpose is to hit the enemy, and their only purpose is to show down the enemy without showing any kind of respect for all what they possess. So the two kinds of laws have emerged in this situation. So when it is the question within the state, it's the question of human rights. And when it is the question of being at war with another state, it's the question of international humanitarian law. So, humanitarian law and human rights law. Human rights law is the law which deals with the rights of the people within a state, not as a combatant with another, not at war with another state. There we talk of human rights. So it's they determine the relationship between the individual, between the people, and the state. And the power of the state should not in any way be used to take away the basic human rights of an individual. So human rights. And human rights, if we go historically, it's a later development as regards the modern human rights law. We can say it has always been there, but the modern history, the history of modern human rights law, that has emerged after the humanitarian law, because these nations, they have been at war, and you can see Europe was too much at war. and they have been incessant in having wars for more than 100 years. And their culmination was First World War, Second World War, and it's that these concepts like humanitarian law, they have emerged in 19th century. And then we talk of Hague Convention in 1907 and four Geneva Conventions in 1949. So they will come into picture when it's the question of military, army, forces, and other nation, people of another nation, women of another nation, ecology of another nation, environment of another nation, and then children of another nation. And when it is the question of human rights, it's the question within that how you treat those who are not in power and how you treat those who are in some weaker position on maybe because of gender, maybe because of childhood, maybe because of being an underprivileged person, maybe being a backward person, or otherwise. So this is basically these two sets of laws, how you can differentiate them, how you can understand them, and then you can understand them, as I always say, with reference to the happenings around. Then you have the practical understanding of it. I would like that if somebody really wants to understand these laws, they should be read in context. As when you will talk of international humanitarian law, then definitely things should be in context. What was happening in Europe in 19th century, and then how people were treating the subjects of other countries, and then definitely one must examine the things around in that period. And then when it is the question of human rights law, again, the things should be put in context, that how they come into existence, how their importance is becomes so much visible, understandable, and a compulsion that you have to follow it. So that has to be seen. Now, dear friends, I think now we are living in a world. We don't have now wars like this First World War, Second World War, and then we don't have the wars that most of the nations which were fighting during 19th century and earlier, they are not fighting in that way. And then the world had got colonized, and there were colonies of English people, uh, this French, even Portuguese had some, and even Japan had colonized certain areas, but we found that decolonization took place. And with that decolonization, the modern international regime came into existence related to anything trade, then this human rights, international humanitarian law, and other diplomatic relations and institutions like League of Nations came into existence after First World War, but that could not work much, and Second World War took place, and that after that the UN came into existence, and that's working so far. We can raise questions about its efficiency and other things, but at the same time, various organs of this United Nation organs, United Nations organization that's nourishing the different institutions and different norms and standards, where a big part of it is related to human rights and international humanitarian law. So, dear friends, what I shall do is, having given this background, and most important is the 1907 Hague Convention, and then four Geneva Conventions of 1949, and then three protocols. They are very important. I'm not getting to the content of it because it's understandable. As I wanted to tell you that ultimately, what is the purpose of human rights? That nobody's life should be taken away. There's a right to life. Nobody should be, uh, asked not to speak. Nobody should be asked not to express himself. Nobody should be asked not to travel. Nobody should be asked not to conduct trade. Nobody should be asked not to own property. Nobody should be asked, not to, have improve your knowledge, dignity, and promote your personality. Nobody can be said it. And that's how the rights are our conscience. Nobody can be deprived of his conscience. Anybody has a right to it. So you have a right to conscience. You have a right to this trade. You have a freedom of expression. You have a freedom or right to live, and you have a right to your own language. You have a right to your own culture. You have a right to uh, to flourish and determine your own future. You have to have your own vision. You have these rights, and then you have a right to have your family. You have a right to determine the education which you want to impart to your child. You have so many rights, and then if those rights are not respected, you don't feel human. You don't feel comfortable, and you don't feel that you are equivalent to other human beings, and then wherever you are in a state, in a country, you don't feel that it's yours. You feel deprived. That's like that. So we find the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Then 1966, this Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and after that, so many conventions. They talk of the people's rights. And then when they get to an advanced stage, they talk of the dignity of women, non-deprivation of the rights of the women, development of women, and protection of children, and protection of all others, as you talk of the generations and others, uh, of the human rights. And the nation states, they give a commitment. I would call it commitment to the whole of the humanity through United Nations, that within their nations they'll follow them. Governments will take steps to advance their human rights. And when they are at war, that at that time the norms will have to be followed as put in the Hague and Geneva Conventions. And the best part of it is that you shall not use the force against a non combatant. If somebody is an ordinary person, he is not possessing the arms, he is not fighting, he is an elderly person, he is a woman, he is a child, or otherwise he is not able to fight, or there are crops, or there is environment, why should you dismantle all these things? These are the basic purposes. And then if somebody comes under your grip, he is a prisoner of war. Now he is not able to harm you. He is not able to cause any damage to you. Why should you kill him? Why should you mutilate his body? Why should you disrespect and defile his personality? Why should you do it? He is a human being. As you are fighting from your side, he is fighting from his side. But once he is not able to do anything more, he is without arms, he is not fighting, maybe he will take a decision, he is not doing it anymore, then definitely these humanitarian law principles they operate, and they have to be followed. So the question is that humanitarian law is much old. It might have been there during Vedic period, pre-Vedic period, post-Vedic period, during Egyptian that civilization, Babylonian civilization, and and any other civilizations, Greek and Roman and others, these principles have been there, and they are in different religions also, that it should not be done. And it is from all this, all this is an emergence of thought from human feelings, uh, clarity in thought, our sensitivity in understanding and feeling, that these principles have emerged, and they take the shape of the convention, they take the shape of a treaty, they take the shape of the law as we find it at national and international levels. So, dear friends, this is the genesis of human rights law, and this is the genesis of international humanitarian law. But as I said, I'm not getting to the content of it, but I'm getting to the context of it. And as regards the content, I said it that we can talk of its content in terms of protection to be given during war to women, because they have been taken as a weaker section. They have been taken as prisoners of war. They have been misused. They have been converted into slaves. They have been sold as slaves. They have been owned as slaves. They have been made to work in fields as slaves and do different kinds of indignified tasks which a human being otherwise should not be done. And in the same way, children and then weaker, this senior people or elder people, and like that, and then all this, the text is in all these conventions is like that. It should not be done. It should not be done. It should not be done. I would say that this is based on the spirit of not causing anything which amounts to defiling the dignity of a human being. On the other hand, we find it's during these periods the movements like Red Cross they have developed. You can see, I take it as a part of this humanitarian standards that these agencies should be allowed to work during these periods of hostility, so that if we find a soldier is in anger and he wants to mutilate the body of another soldier from another country, no, it should not happen. And in such situations, we should not only stop from damaging or causing more damage to another person. There should be facilities for respecting the body of the human being, and if the person is alive, to provide him medical aid and other kinds of things, treatments, as Red Cross is doing. So, allowing the Red Cross to work throughout the world, that's one of the very important scenarios which is under the umbrella of international humanitarian law. As you find that people are sometimes fighting on the basis of faith, sometimes on the basis of race, and sometimes on the basis of now economic interests. We have found that that this Red Cross movement, it was a very great and good movement, a product of the thought which gave birth to human rights and humanitarian law, that somebody wants to work for the betterment of human beings during these periods, as you have heard the names of Henry Dunant, and you have uh, uh, that this during wartime, that lady, I'm missing her name at the moment, that how they were treating the human beings during those periods, and that spirit has to be adopted by the state also. They have to train their soldiers, their military, paramilitary, or other combatants. They have to train them in such a way that they respect the human dignity of the person belonging to the other side. They do not cause any devastation to this, to other nation, and that's how that concept of appropriate use of force is to be there. As For example, this time human being is having the power to destroy the whole of the globe in few seconds. But what prevents it is a feeling, and on that basic feeling, some norms have come into existence, that when can you use which weapon, when can you use which strategy, when can you use which power. And that's how presently you find that whenever you find any violation or apprehension of violation of any humanitarian law or human rights law, people adopt the path of imposing sanctions or having some other diplomatic kind of this strategies adopted. And it's not that now that you immediately get to the arms and you are finishing others uh, without any consideration to their right to exist as human beings. And that's how the institutions like this Security Council, General Assembly of United Nations, International Court of Justice, they have come into existence for this reason, that they will be monitoring. I said earlier, I'm not going to the efficiency of them, but the purpose of them is like that. And I can also say that we cannot say that they are all most redundant. No, they have an influence. They do have that kind of that existence potential, that they are preventing a devastating war of the kind as in First World War, as in Second World War, or the wars which were being fought in Europe in the last 100 and 200 years. They do prevent. They are largely, succeeding in it, and then at the same time, they are looking to other aspects when wars take place because of race, because of creed, because of color, because of economic interests, and others. There are institutions now that they prevent that kind of happening by having an advanced agenda of working in all the states together, where UNICEF is working for something, UN food program is working for something, and to meet the disaster situations, some are working. Then in many countries there are peacekeeping forces of the United Nations. They are working there, and then they take note of many human rights violations from place to place, and they are using diplomatic channels and other kinds of things so that they don't come to the situation where human being turns beast like brutal and kills the women, kills the children, and kills the elderly people, kills the non-combatants, kills the armless people. It's prevented through those situations, and at the base of it is the humanitarian law spirit, because all those norms, they point in this direction. In the different articles in these conventions, they talk of the rights of the children, rights of women, rights of prisoners of war, and then elderly people, and like that. So that the existing scenario, when we look to human rights law and when we look to humanitarian law, they are working together in different capacities. And uh, and the peak of it is, the pinnacle of it is, that when human being has a capacity to destroy, still there are restraining forces and there are restraining strategies, where they do the things diplomatically rather than getting to arms directly in one go. Yes, there are exceptional circumstances, exceptional situations, that when the world was getting reshaped after the First World War, at that time, we found that certain conflicts which were very severe, they got concretized, and by that, the world was divided into different blocks, and that created racial considerations, regional considerations, and then also that created some considerations on the basis of maintenance of economy and development of certain nations, and that though continued up to the Second World War. But after the Second World War, I would say a lot many conventions came into existence as elimination of all kinds of discrimination on the basis of race. About women also it's there, and then various programs are there. And in 1946 itself, the general agreements on trade and tariff, they came into existence, which after another 45 years resulted into World Trade Organization, and we do have so many agreements under that, and they are promoting international trade. They are promoting the cross-border activities, cultural this transmissions, and that's how this in the context of international humanitarian law and human rights law, the world is in a way reshaped, and we find that we don't find the situations now too much where we would say that this humanitarian law, it's not existing in that form as it was earlier. No, I would say it is still existing there, because this is at the back of all progressive steps which are taken by states to prevent war and to prevent damage to nations or to people during any kind of conflict. Yes, we may say that earlier there used to be direct wars. Now, then we found after Second World War, Cold War. Cold War taking place, the nations, they develop blocks, economic blocks, common interest blocks, and then they try to damage another block, as we can find that after the Second World War, United Soviet Socialist Republic was a very strong kind of state as such. And on the other hand, we find the United States was also a very strong state, but they remained in Cold War, and through various kinds of strategies adopted by various blocs, we found that the USSR, that diluted, that country got divided into 13 countries. And that kind of situation is existing. And that way, I would say that the principles, which are basically the international humanitarian law principles, they enjoy their relevance even today. And they are there, they have to be there. And it is their existence and presence which makes the people not to come to the direct war and cause damage to the other country. Now, having said that, I would say that there are certain unfortunate situations, and under the same motivation of subjugating other blocs, subjugating other countries, and like that, there have been certain happenings in this 20th century, in the later part of it, where some countries did something as what happened in Iraq, and then also I think certain things in other countries like that, and without any lawful justifications, or we may say any factual justifications. There was loss of life, there was loss of property, there was suffering of women, there was suffering of children because of direct use of power and because of restrictions. I think now humanitarian law must not only remain in its principles during that war, but humanitarian law principles must be extended to these situations expressly. Expressly, I mean, conventions should be developed on that, so that these kinds of adventures they are not done, and the world is allowed to grow with harmony, with peace, and with equality, with fraternity, uh, and then to its support are the human rights. That means all the governments within the nations, they should follow the human rights. They should not discriminate one group of people on the basis of language, race, creed, color, or faith, or gender, or any other reason. That's how, I would say, if you talk of the interplay between international humanitarian law and international human rights law, I would say they have to go in this world. They have to go together. It's not that they will be only one will be at this time. No, they have to go together, because the human being on this planet Earth is today together, at war and peace. And nations are today together at war and peace. So, though we don't find an open use of arms, but there is a race of arms, which is, today the richest market in the world is the market of arms. Show of strength is through arms, and it's they have not remained confined only to planet Earth. They have gone to the space also, and you can find that every such country is trying to develop its potential to cause the maximum damage to anybody against it in the shortest period of time. So I think the humanitarian law has should be promoted. Take note of it, and on the following the principles of human dignity, are human beings' right to exist, and then at the same time the right of the planet Earth to exist, the right of the environment to exist, the right of the vegetation to exist, the right of the water bodies to exist. That must be seen. I think all these activities should be regulated. It should not be merely the use of the weapon, it should be also the protection of the weapon, and then production of the possibilities of promoting and developing the weapon. That should also now come under the humanitarian law, because when we allow that potential to develop, there are the possibilities that it may be used against another, and in the least it creates a threat in others' mind. And I don't think that when human beings live under threat in a sense of insecurity, we can't say they are living under the umbrella of laws. They are living under the umbrella of peace. They are living under the umbrella of harmony, which is the purpose of peace. And they cannot expect justice also, equality, liberty, fairness. They can't expect it, that when there is too much of the might, and that might is reflected in the possession of the arms by anybody, any state, and that's how the scenario today we find in the world is like that. And when we go to those previous days, that when we were having that primitive kind of that law for protection of women during war, prisoners of war, children during war, visitation during war, this thing during war, or during these periods the war should take place. This it should not. I think it has come beyond. Uh, as I talked of, the Red Cross should be very strong institution, and institutions like that. And you may give it any name, as there have been sometimes differences when the Muslim bloc said that Red Cross is with Christian background, so they used the term Hilal Ahmar, Red Crescent. And then also we suggest Red Crystal, because that will not belong to. one faith and another. That kind of thing has to emerge. Those institutions have to emerge. They will automatically result in giving strength to the humanitarian principles during war, during conflicts. And one situation of proxy war, which has developed in modern times, I think that will have to be addressed in a better way by the global community without blaming one or the other for this, because that kind of situation is created by certain kinds of behavior adopted by certain states, or behavior adopted by certain people in position of power, or behavior adopted by certain groups or certain nations. It has to be addressed as in a very as a human issue, as a human problem, which has its own background in economy. It has its own background in this questions of dignity, in questions of respecting others' rights. So that has to be seen, and that should be there should be a prompting of the people with authority and potential. They must come forward and respect certain natural principles on which human rights are based, on which international humanitarian law is based, and that's there. And then, dear friends, I would also say, as I always say, that trade has to be harmonized, and trade should not give more importance, more benefits to certain blocs, certain countries, and others should be pushed. And as intellectual property rights, that's an aspect where human rights are involved. And then, if they are not respected, it may in future result into conflict situations, and that's how the knowledge possessed traditionally by the people, by nations which are today not so developed, they are underdeveloped or developing, their interests should be protected in situations of war. And I would say that it should not take even a second to the world community to decide that the use of principle of compulsory licensing should be used to provide medicines, life-saving drugs, and then for providing these vaccines to anybody in the world. This is not the situation where you have to get for trade strategies and make the maximum of the profits out of it. And if it is done, then naturally many people are restless. Many people feel indignified. They feel oppressed, and as if they are not partners to the wealth on this planet Earth, as if they are not these inhabitants on this planet Earth. So they may not have the potential to come out with arms and fight, but in their heart of hearts, that anger is there. In their heart of hearts, that kind of worry is there, disappointment is there. And that's how I would say that trade policies should also be shaped so that they are supportive to the advancement of the agenda of human rights law and humanitarian law. They have to be, these all activities have to be with it. That's why we find a very good subject coming up: business and human rights. And it can be business and human rights during peace, and business and humanitarian law during war. Because, we find generally trade, everything is suspended when there is a humanitarian lawsuit, when there is a war situation. Can we not, in this civilized world now, uh, allow things to be resolved in such a way that trade is not suspended, respect for this human activity is not suspended, and then allow the profits out of trade to be spent on the people anywhere in the world. And that's how, a nation may be in conflict with another nation, but at the same time, there should not be anything which will prevent one nation to support the oppressed, support the people who are needy. They need food, they need medicine, they need any other thing. That kind of philanthropy should not stop. That's a new dimension of human rights law and humanitarian law. So, dear friends, two perspectives which I presented is that earlier the humanitarian law was exclusively for this when there is war, and then during that war, the warring these nations, they will have to follow certain principles so that they don't cause a damage to human life and other things like that. And in the same way, the human rights law is to be always followed by the state with respect to the citizens of that, with respect to the persons living in that state. And then the new dimension is that this we don't find those kinds of traditional wars now too much there. We find the war is taking place strategically through different ways, and there is arms race too much there, which is affecting the rights of the human beings. If there is too much of illiteracy in the world, if there is too much ill health in the world, if there is too much malnourishment in the world, that's because the nations spend more on acquiring the arms, and less they spend on health. That's how this has to change. That there should be a very strong international humanitarian law with new dimensions, and without any lame excuses given to taken by one country to attack another country. That should not happen, and there should be more confidence in the institutions of United Nations, which can enforce better the humanitarian standards during war, and then also they can persuade the nations to respect all their citizens as per the established human rights standards. And then I would say that as law teachers or any other teacher related to maybe a political science, history, or whatever, doing work in human rights and humanitarian law, they have to now identify their base for this creating interest in human rights and humanitarian law, and create this agenda for research in these areas. So that I would like, because we are in a faculty development program. So here I would say that teachers should develop interest in it, and very good research should be done as per human rights standards, development of law, enforcement of law, and different kinds of violations of human rights and violations of different sections of the society. Macro level and micro level studies must be conducted, as we find that many things remain unaddressed, as mostly the scholars in India, they do research on general topics, but I believe that they must do research on various things, like if I would say that a new regime kind of thing has come up in humanitarian law after this Second World War. And we have now International Criminal Court, and then various tribunals are established. How they work? Are they really doing good work? Why here and why not there? Are they really taking a note of it? And then to what extent the humanitarian law principles are being followed in different conflicts in Africa, in West Asia, or in East of Asia, or within Asian countries, like that, and what sort of conflicts are there. You can take various topics on it and get people do research on it, and how what was behind various resolutions of United Nations, what was behind various kinds of strategies which have been adopted, and what is the success of those, and what is the failure of those. And then you can even talk of understanding How many people understand basically the purpose and philosophy of human rights and humanitarian law? And then how many look to it that can we really possibly follow it? Then look to the division of the world into various blocks at different periods of time. Do research on it. That's how you can develop this interest. And then in the era of use of technology, how can we use the information and communication technology for monitoring the war, for monitoring this violation of the rights of the people during war, and even during peacetime within the state, how we can use them, and then how we can improve the processes of dispute resolution or conflict resolution, and then how we can make the institutions related to human rights and humanitarian law more effective. That research has to be done. There is not that kind of research done, and that's basically that why we have to get into this human rights and humanitarian law. It should not be the same game, and even visiting some of the good institution will always keep off talking. Article this says that there should not be use of force against women. Article this says there should not be done this thing to children. There should not be. I think we have not confined to that only. Now we have to come to that stage where we have to do research, critical analysis of the functioning of the institution, and you can find that interventions in countries like Afghanistan, in Iraq, and some other places, or presence of forces somewhere. It's good also somewhere. Where are the United Nations peacekeeping forces? In which of the countries? In which of the states? What is the purpose? What they can do? What should be their job there? What should be their task there? Is it merely they will be like observers or restrictive forces? And then one more aspect on which good research can be done: reporting. uh, you know, reporting during the conflict periods, as journalism and legal journalism has to develop, and there they have to see that have the correct reporting of the war situations, happenings during war. If that's not done, how can you? Then it will not fulfill its purpose. It may be the perpetrator of wrong. He may present his image better than one who is the sufferer. So the question is, when you have this international humanitarian law with information and communication technology, use it properly, use it efficiently, use it effectively, you can find this will be a very good this barrier who can regulate the behavior of any soldier, of any strategist, or any person who is at the front and violating the environmental norms, violating the human norms, or committing cruelty to animals. Maybe if a country is having good this wildlife resources, then maybe another attacking nation may harm it, damage it. But information and communication technology can be very supportive to this implementation of humanitarian conventions and their norms. If there can be a proper reporting, documentation, and efficient communication within seconds, this information should go to different institutions, different responsible authorities, and to the people of the world. They must know it, what's happening. That's how we have to keep the things changing, promoting through our research, and then through our teaching on that basis, and then by developing interest in human rights and humanitarian law. I think you can promote an agenda for a better world. And if somebody says that it can't work much, but at the same time, I'll say that even if you make the world a little bit better, that's a contribution. And then for your individual success, that's very important. You have not to stop it as a teacher. You have to keep thinking of it, and then human rights law perspectives will get into any law. It may be the property law, it may be the land acquisition law, it may be the intellectual property rights law, it may be the developmental law, and that's how, when we talk of now UN Sustainable Development Goals, they are related to the same thing. That tomorrow, right to water may become most important because the water sources are, they are getting affected in a big way by changes in ecology, and globally we find that that's coming up in a big way. Then how to do it? How to manage it, uh, and then that's definitely related to right to safe water, right to water, and right to safe water. In the world today, there are many people to whom water is not available, and there are many people to whom the safe water is not available, and there is only a small group of people percent who have safe water available to them. And from that point of view of human rights, you can find that, I may say again something about women. Woman has always been a sufferer of this human anger. She has been a victim of it. And during wars, they have suffered a lot. And I think mechanisms should be developed so that the principles given in four Geneva Conventions, they are followed. Otherwise, we don't have later on the things available, and certain trials which have taken place in history and then in contemporary history, and then as the international criminal courts are developing, then that's a good sign, and that may help in better this advancement of international humanitarian law. So that has to be done, that has to be followed. But I'll again insist that you must do research in this area. You decide, I'll produce 10 LLM scholars in international humanitarian law. I shall produce 10 LLM scholars in international human rights law. And I think that that can be wonderful. And that will mean that you have created something, and then you are innovative, and then you relate it to laws related to trade, commerce, business, property, and like that. And you can relate it to governance, can relate it to priorities to be fixed by the state. That's how you can do it. So I believe that the what's required by a law teacher, and where we have a higher level of getting to thought and thinking about human rights law and humanitarian law, we should go to that. And that's how I would like to stop here, and maybe some of you will be kind to me and ask a few questions. And I don't have answers, but I shall respond from my side. So with that, Dr. Junaid, and then Dr. Uh, S- Siddiqui, you can ask if there is anybody to ask some questions.
Yes, sir. There are questions which have been posted by the participants. Uh,
Yes.
so the first question, which has been given by one of the participants, or rather, I'm not taking in a particular order, in a random
Uh-huh.
order it is,
Yes.
whether the recent Israel attacks over the religious sites can
Uh-huh.
be stated as the complete abuse of power under international human rights law. This has been posted by Mr. Ejaz Hussain, one of the
See,
FDP participants.
it's obviously, such an attack is definitely a violation of the norm, and that should not have happened. And there is, I think it's clear that when there was not anything like that, so when it was done, uh, motivated and like that, it's a violation of humanitarian principles. It is so. The countries in which of this. Yeah, I think it needs not much explanation. It needs a frank expression of it. In this, I would only say that when you make frank expressions, it gives a chance to the perpetrator of violence also to think about it.
Was
There
not
is
anything
no
like
need for
that.
any
So
hypocrisy
when
on
it
that.
was done, motivated and like that, it's a violation of humanitarian.
Yes, that's my response. There can be difference of opinion, but this is my response. Yeah, other question.
Of
Is
violence
this
also to think about.
Answer.
uh,
One question which has been posted is one of a very general nature in my regards, I suppose. But yes, the question has been posted by some Sam Ansari, one again the participant of the FDP. He says that
Yes, that's
what does humanitarian law say about terrorism?
opinion, but this is my
And there is a sub question attached to it that whether it regulates terrorist attacks committed in peacetime.
see, actually, this humanitarian law is basically related to states. And now it will depend upon this basically what is behind and who is behind it. If a state is promoting it, then definitely it should be treated under the humanitarian law. And if it is of the kind that within a state, because of the state
Humanitarian
policies,
laws say about
if
terrorism.
that kind of
And there is a sub question
violence is
attached to
there,
it
that kind of
that whether it
emergence of
regulates
terrorism is
terrorist
there,
attacks
so
committed in
it will
peacetime.
have to be treated within the
see
state
actually
itself,
this
and both situations are
humanitarian
clear.
law
So
is
if it is an
basically related
interstate,
to
then naturally
states,
under humanitarian law,
and
it should be dealt with.
now it
And
will depend
if it is
upon
within the state,
this
then definitely it's
basically
within the state it
what is
should be dealt
behind
upon.
and
These
who
are
is
the two
behind it.
situations, and it will
This is
depend
how it is
upon the factual situation.
regulated.
However, the international community should remain concerned about both situations, that this kind of thing should not happen. And that's why I'm saying that there should be at the global level very strong institutions which will be looking to these kinds of situations and bring back peace and harmony. And when you talk of it, this when you talk of terrorism, then definitely this is a situation where somebody he is going out of this framework of law, and then actually in such a situation you have to look to it. If it is promoted by other states, you must take it through that mechanism. And if it is within the state, for example, if we find in Sri Lanka that a group of its own people they turn angry, then it has to be treated in another way. But I would suggest that there should be cooperation at the international level, that states cooperate in curbing such kinds of tendencies, and also in making states to work in harmony, so that such kinds of situations do not emerge. That's required. So that's we otherwise we can't have a peaceful world. Yeah, that's the thing. Okay, next question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, next question.
Yes, sir. The next question is again about the applicability of the law, sir. That is, what is
Okay,
the
next question.
difference between international humanitarian law and the UN Declaration of Human Rights, UNDHR,
Yeah, yeah.
in
See,
terms of its application?
I said it that human rights is basically for a state to respect the rights of its the people living in that state. And humanitarian law is for war. This is human rights during war. When you are at war and you are then there are possibilities of you are violating human rights of the people of other state, other country. So in that situation, we have humanitarian law. But when you are dealing with the people of your own country, at that time we talk of human rights law. So Universal Declaration of Human Rights, when you will read it, you will find that then it will say the nation states should give to its people like this, promote education, promote this thing, promote that thing. And when you will read the conventions on which humanitarian law is based, you will then find that it's quite the war-like situation. And during the war, you can say humanitarian law is human rights law during war, and human rights law is during peace within the state. That's like that. Yeah. So you are not audible to me. I'm not listening to you. Uh, I, you are not audible to me. You have to unmute yourself somewhere.
Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir.
Uh,
The next question is with regard to the applicability of the international humanitarian law and to whom specifically the protection is being given under the IHL, International Humanitarian Law.
See, you must have heard of Nuremberg trials, is it? So, see what's
You are
there.
not audible to me.
Uh,
I
okay,
am not
but
listening to you.
can you hear to me this?
I,
Are the
you
organizers
are not
able to?
audible to me. You have to unmute yourself somewhere.
Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir. The next.
हम्म, अच्छा ये पुराना ही आ रहा है इसमें. So should I respond to it? See, I'll tell you, when a war takes place, then excesses are done by one nation to another nation. If you take an earlier example of Nuremberg trials, then tribunals were established where the Nazis, people who had perpetrated that war, who had created that Holocaust, who had created excesses to people, they were tried there. Under which law? That's humanitarian law. In the same way, in Bangladesh, very recently, in few years back, those who had created the situation and they were found responsible for creating excesses, committing excesses to people during their war. That war, they were tried, and many of them were hanged also. This is how and you find in some other countries some these. And today we find that International Criminal Court has been established, and some tribunals have been established. So it's the excesses committed during war, they will be tried under the humanitarian law. That's how it has to be seen. So you can proceed ahead. Why there is a gap? I think there
Okay,
is
sir.
a
The
gap.
last question I would be taking for the technical session, and it
Mhm.
is, what is the
So you
role?
can proceed ahead. Why there is a gap? I think
Okay,
there is
sir.
a
The
gap.
last question I would be taking for the technical session, and it is, what is the
So you
role?
can proceed ahead. Why there is a gap?
Sir,
I think
okay,
there is
sir.
a
The
gap.
last question I would be taking for the technical session, And it is what is the role? So there is a problem of connectivity issue here because
Yeah,
the weather is by the God's grace. It has gone some. It is rainy
Acha.
weather out here, so therefore.
Okay,
Uh,
in my place it is
so
very
the
good.
last question is, what is the
Yes.
role of spiritualism in application of human right law in the three-dimensional world?
Uh, I think if there was something like spirituality, it would have been really good, because as I talked of spirit of law, spirit of policies, spirit of thinking, had it really been that spirit, then it is very good. If somebody talks of some other spirituality, then he should use that spirituality in this way, that he is having true spirit about policies of law, about implementing law, about very honest, promotion of policies of law. That is a better spirituality, rather than somebody claims he is connected with God and committing excesses to others. Somebody claiming he is spiritually doing something and he is killing another person. We can't accept that kind of spirituality. Spirituality is basically being true to realities. That is spirituality. And true God, whatever you believe, if you believe in a God, in a principle, you should truly believe in it. And then do the best of the deeds with that spirituality, with that spirit. Otherwise, somebody will claim he is the follower of somebody and therefore he has attained spirituality. And therefore, then for that spirituality, he is discriminating against others. I don't think that's a true spirituality. It's not like that. So, my idea of spirituality is being connected with the true spirit. And true spirit is that all human beings deserve the best on this planet Earth. They share water, they share air, they share land, they share its resources, and nobody should be starving, nobody should be hungry, nobody should be without medical treatment, and nobody should be compelled to get to war, or nobody should be, made the subject of the war. And that's how spirituality should be understood and how spirituality should be carried forward. That's how I would say that spirituality can really help, but it should be the spirituality which considers everything in its true spirit and for the whole of the humanity. And that's the spirit of human rights, that's the spirit of humanitarian law. Even if you find in front of you the weakest person, child, then I wonder that if you possess spirituality and you are claiming to be with spirituality, why should a rape take place? Why should a child be put under bonded labor? Why should a child be made a slave and he is to be ill treated and trafficking should take place? Why so? If you are having so, all spirituality must be used for these things. And there is, hoarding, profiteering, this dishonest kind of marketing, exploitation. So, again, it's all that there should be a spiritual movement, but spiritual movement should not be that I am more spiritual than you and therefore you are subject to me. You have no right to be with me. You have no right to be equal to me. That kind of spirituality is not there. So that's how I would say that as Constitution of India has enshrined spirituality in one term, that is fraternity and dignity. Fraternity and dignity. So if you are in fraternity, you are in spirituality. If you respect others' dignity, you are in spirituality. If you give indignified treatment to another person, you are not spiritual. And if you are not developing fraternity, you are not spiritual. That's the main point. I think that's if there is any other query, please.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
To
Thank
end the
you.
technical session formally, now I would like to invite Dr. Sadaf Khan to render a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Professor.
Abuse of power, treatment of vulnerable groups, regulation of law in the international and national sphere is to be checked and regulated through the regime of human rights. On behalf of the entire Faculty of Law at Integral University, I, Dr. Sadaf Khan, render a heartfelt thanks for your informative and lucrative technical session. Sir, the information rendered is expected to be enjoyed and useful for the participants. Once again, for the active participation, I thank all the participants, FDP participants, and on behalf of the coordinators, expect your active involvement in subsequent activities with regard to this session. Thank you. Thank you all.